Everybody, I wanted to make a couple of slides that outline sort of the presentation process, and then we'll actually go into the syllabus and talk a little bit about how things are organized there and some of the details that I've filled in since we last spoke. So, all right, so presentation process, basically covering from when you have discussion questions to peer review. So what's going on when we think about and use these different types of terms? Let's look at your career ecosystem type of assignment here. So you have your day of in-class presentation where you're going to present those slides that we talked about in the video that has the career ecosystem. But what about this kind of stuff? What's going on over here? Well, two things we want to do. First of all is that we want to have a discussion peer, one of your peers, basically go through and generate two discussion questions to try to help prompt engagement and thought in terms of and the class discussion about your particular topic. So 3 days before you present, you're going to share your presentation and your short paper with me and also with your discussion peer. And so that's going to be listed. That's listed in the syllabus, and I'll show you where that's at. So that means that 3 days before the presentation, the discussion peer will begin generating two discussion questions. So go through, try to have them be good questions that you think will be thoughtful and meaningful for everybody in the class. Then, and so that discussion peer can communicate this, and this can all be done in Google Docs using comments and so on, so that you're able to efficiently be able to communicate with each other. A day before the presentation, the discussion peer can actually share the questions. You could do it sooner if you want. That's awesome, but certainly give them 24 hours beforehand so that they have a way of actually incorporating your question into their presentation, or at least being able to try to address it or be ready for that question as it comes up. Then you give your presentation on the career ecosystem, and then 1 week after the presentation, a different person, a peer reviewer, will give you feedback with the presenter and professor on your work. And so in that case, that feedback is delivered as an email. They'll send that as an email to me in terms of what that feedback about your particular type of presentation. So that's a career ecosystem type of setup. So that's a first assignment. The other assignment that you have to make a presentation for is for science journaling and the science journaling video. So in this case, since it's a video and we're not relying on having people present in class and using in-class time for it, basically by the 4th of October, you are going to share your article that you're going to present on the video with your discussion peer. So we're doing the same kind of setup where you actually share what it is that you're going to be working on with a peer. They're going to come up with questions, and then you're going to get some feedback. So in this case, it's the 4th of October is well before you actually you do your presentation 10 days later. So you're just sharing the article, and then the discussion peer is going through it to try to understand what that article is. And you guys can go back and forth about what those types of things. So the discussion peer is basically trying to generate two questions from that are helpful. So on the 11th, that's when the discussion peer will actually try to share it back, and it's trying to, you want the discussion peer to be able to understand the article that they're being presented. Then the presentation will be submitted on the 14th, and so the discussion peer, try to incorporate the discussion peer's questions into your presentation that you actually submit on video for that. Okay, then on the 25th, then you have your peer reviewer would have looked at the video and then given feedback with both me and the professor through an email. Okay, so that's the science journaling video and how that assignment works through. Now let's look at the presentation process for the final paper. So your final paper, you're going to give that presentation. We have a video on that. And then there's, how is this set up? So here's your day of in-class presentation that's been assigned to you. And now, 3 days before that presentation, presenter shares a presentation in the current draft of the paper. So whether it's the first draft or the final draft, whatever you've got that's the latest version, share that with the discussion peer. Then the discussion peer will begin to generate the two discussion questions on your particular topic. So it should be pretty cool and interesting for them to be able to kind of go through that stuff. 1 day before, then the discussion peer will actually share the question so that in your in-class presentation, you'll be ready for that kind of question that comes up or be able to incorporate it. And then finally, then on the 9th, that's the end of the semester, that's when you're going to want to actually, the peer reviewer would have shared the feedback with the presenter and the professor. So we want it all by at least the 9th, if not sooner. So that's the presentation process that we have for these different things. What does this look like in terms of the syllabus and what we have in our schedule? So like we talked about in class, we have this kind of setup here where we've been going through and ticking away at some of the tools and developing some of our syllabus to try to really have some meaningful assignments as we kind of move ahead. So we're not going to have class on Monday, and then then on Wednesday we're going to meet again, talk about writing a review article, picking our topic, and then the career ecosystem draft will be due on the 6th, and we'll still continue in class doing this work. So the ecosystem, you'll share it with me by Google Docs, and then I can start to work on it. So in this setup that I have here in this table, we can see here this is pretty straightforward, but those are class activities. But I've also have these columns here that are describing basically what are things that you're going to be doing, either due dates, like what we have here, the career ecosystem draft, or things that I'm suggesting that you're actually doing during this time to prepare for the next step, which is like reaching out to contacts and everything to get ready for your career ecosystem presentation. So let's track through each of these different columns and see what happens. So career ecosystem drafts due on the 6th. Then, and so you would have spent some time drafting this piece, and in the video I talk a lot about how to actually go through that. Then you're going to be reaching out to contacts and trying to follow up to see if you can actually ground truth some of those things that you have out there. That takes some time. Then you'll go through and you'll have your ecosystem presentation. And so this is all written out and assigned in another table a little further down in the syllabus. So let's scroll down and take a look at that. Here, what we have, I'll move this over so it's a little easier for you to see, your name, and then the presentation date for your ecosystem, and then who your discussion peer is and your peer reviewer. So if you remember, I told you about the discussion peer and peer reviewer. Now you can see who it is, the last names of these people who you're going to actually be sharing it with. So that's how you're going to connect. These are the people that you're going to end up wanting to connect with. And so you can reach out to them using the Blackboard site, and the various names are listed there, and you can connect through that way. And then ultimately use their email to be able to connect by Google Docs and so on. So that's the strategy that I would end up using there. So now you've got your you know your name, and you know when your ecosystem day is due. So that's great. So that's a kind of setup that you would have for the ecosystem. So now during the wow, there's a spelling error there. All right. So during this period, then, what we're going to have is people will be presenting their ecosystems and going through this, and you've seen what the list is. So in that case, it's important for everybody to be in class. The peer review for the ecosystems are due for the first set, the ones that are presented on the 23rd. It's due. That peer review is due on the 30th of September, so a week later. And so then the peer review of the presentations on the 25th are due on October 2nd, and so on. So now the peer reviewers kind of know when they have to go through and do their work in terms of feeding back to it. So let's go through an example here then of somebody who actually had this. So career ecosystem draft. Let's take a look at Atherton. So Atherton, you would present on the 23rd of September. Your discussion peer is Zelinsky, and then your peer reviewer is Prinz. So these are the folks that you're going to be coordinating with. So the discussion peer, that's a person that you're going to want to reach out 3 days, like on the 20th of September, to be able to share your career ecosystem and then your paper that you have. And so your paper may not be in like the most final version since your presentation is actually on the 23rd, but it should be somewhat close. You want to have something that's meaningful for the discussion peer to take a peek at and be able to give some feedback for it. So again, the discussion peer isn't necessarily saying this is a piece of junk, it's not done yet, but you want it. But they're also trying to help generate some interesting questions or follow-ups that you might be able to work into what you're doing. Okay, so awesome. Then you actually present. Whoops, sorry. I'll scroll back down. That was a little too hyper. So then you'll present on the 23rd, and then what you'll have is a week later, Prinz will go through and submit a review by emailing it to me. So there we go. We go back up to here. So Prinz would be the one who would be sending me something on your ecosystem presentation that you gave on the 23rd. So that's the plan that we have for this, and then it just iterates for the rest of the folks in the class. All right, and then so by then the whole ecosystem thing is done, and you've completed that part of it. Let's go back up to the science journaling assignment. So now here, what it is that as you pick up a topic or a paper, you're going to want to try to find a paper that you really want to dig into and that you're going to want to present. You're going to make a video of this presentation, much like the video that I'm creating for you guys here, in which you're actually going through the different slides and presenting it as you would in the class. So in this case, you're wanting to ID the paper that you're going to want to present, and then what we have is, one moment. I have you guys shifting to analyzing the paper that you want to present, making sure that you have that all worked out, and then that you share your article with the discussion peer on the 4th of October, and then the discussion peer can share questions with the presenter on the 11th of October, and then the science journaling video will be due there. So that's what we have for that. So here's that 4th of October and then the 11th of October. So that's how those things kind of fit together. So then you'd have you've shared the article and maybe even had the presentation that you can actually share with the discussion peer as well to help them out. So then they share the questions with the presenter. The science journaling assignment then is due. It's submitted. You record it, that kind of thing. And then the peer reviewer generates feedback. So that process is like the peer reviewer is working on it, but the peer review of the science journaling video is not due until the 25th. So this is just telling you kind of what, in non-bold things, what you should be doing during this time for the science journaling argument. Because everybody's been assigned to somebody to go through and do some peer review on that. Okay, so now we've got that science journaling assignment, and we've seen how that's flowed through. So final project, then how does this work? So the final project then, what we've got is you're going to pick and work on your topic and proposal. So you guys have started to do that already just in this past class and kind of dug into it a little bit with just some casual conversation and some thought on your own. But now, and then as you kind of dig into this more, you'll continue to work on setting what that scope is. Your proposal is due on the 11th of September. And you just share that with me by Google Docs. So there's no peer review, no discussion, nothing like that. Just submit the proposal to me following the general outline that we had and using the samples that I provided on Blackboard as a guide. So then what you have is you're working on your outline after you've submitted the proposal, and you're generating that and working on making this. And then your paper outline will be due on the 2nd of October. So that will be, you'll submit that to me, and that will have the more fulfilled out references. Then you'll start in your first draft, and you work on that, and then your first draft of your paper will be due, and then you'll be working on a peer review of your colleague's first draft. So we're going to start having peer review of that first draft, and then you're also getting ready for the presentation. So this peer review of the first draft is actually really important. It's nice feedback for the person who's just submitted their first draft and is really trying to figure out, what to do next. Okay, so fine. Then what's next? And as a note, the person who's doing the peer review of the first draft is also the same person who's actually going to be giving you peer review of your final presentation. So you're getting kind of a double. They're seeing it at the very beginning and at the very end of this process, so they can comment on how wonderfully it's developed from its first stages. So then we have this. Your first draft is due on the 6th of November, so you would have looked through and given some comments here. So not a ton of time, but you need to be able to get started on your final draft. Now you're working on your final draft and getting things together during this time. So here is when presentations start. on your final project. You'll note that you would have turned in your first draft here on the 30th, and then the 11th of November, you're doing your presentations. So you want to have your first draft as close as you can to what your final draft would be, including your eye on what figures you're going to use and so on, to be able to be well prepared for those presentations that are coming up. Now, when you get to these presentations, we follow this kind of guideline, where 3 days before your presentation, you actually share your presentation in whatever draft of your paper you have, and then 1 day ahead of the presentation, your discussion peer will share questions with you, and then you have your day of your in-class presentation, and then on the night that gives it feedback. So what would that look like for Albertson? Because Atherton, sorry. So you have that's science journaling, we talked about that. You had your discussion peer and peer reviewer here, but we're going to actually get into the final presentation on the 11th of November. Your discussion peer is Westerlink, so that's who you'll connect with 3 days before your presentation date on the 11th and share your draft of your paper and so on. And then your peer reviewer is Shipper here. So this peer reviewer will also not only look at your first draft, but also be looking at your final draft of your oral presentation. So they'll be giving you some good feedback as you move through it. So be nice to them, give them chocolate. Okay, so that's your presentations that you have. And you'll go through those presentations, and then there's a bit of a break here as we go through that Thanksgiving area, and there's some travel I'll be doing, so we'll have online office hours to help answer questions as you're working on that final draft, and then completing those presentations there. So I think we've covered a lot of those different types of elements and how the syllabus actually works, along with how those presentations work. I hope that was helpful. The last things I'm going to point out to, I'm going to bring us back up to the top and scroll down. Sorry if this is making you dizzy. But here's a table talking about the schedule and the points, when things are due. Then, and an important thing is actually getting this AMP assessment test completed. A little bit about the discussion questions here, and then we have a link and a video for that. And then an example of what we have for the science journaling article, and then an example that we have for the final presentations. That link's not on there yet. I'm going to be posting that soon, and incorporating it into the syllabus before I upload it. And then some of the descriptions of like what science journaling is, proposal, and presentations as well. So I think this will help you out, and I think we're going to close there.